The first question I asked was if I pooped, and the second question was, did I tear?
As a pelvic floor physical therapist working exclusively with moms and their lady parts, I love, absolutely love a good birth story. And that is pretty much part of why this channel exists, so I can share parts of my own birth story and experiences, as well as other women's experiences with all of you, so that you can try to shape and form what you want your own birth experience to be like. And while I have no problem sharing my own birth experience over and over again on this channel, I don't want you to get sick of that. So I have invited someone onto my channel today that I am pretty sure you're going to recognize. I am out of my mind excited today to have Heidi, aka Mrs. Dudedad, on my channel today to share parts of her birth story. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Heidi, we've definitely heard bits and pieces about your pregnancy and your postpartum experience, at least for sure from the perspective of Dudedad, or Taylor, your husband. But I would really love to dive into parts of your birth story today. And so I asked in advance because I wanted to make sure you were okay with getting a little bit personal, taking our friendship to the next level today. I want to hear some of the nitty-gritty about your pregnancy and labor and delivery, postpartum experiences. And I also want to know just about how they were different from your first birth to now having your third birth with your son Otto last year.
I have zero pain tolerance, just zero. My first baby, I thought, okay, I want to try to go as long as I can and just see what my body's capable of. Because you don't know. Yeah. You have no idea what to expect. And with him, my water broke. He was 4 days late and my water broke and I lost all of the water right away, which I didn't know was even really a thing. In movies, it's a big gush of water and then that's it. Yeah. That's what it was like with him. It was literally just this huge gush and then I never felt it again. I know that most of my water was gone right away. And so I just had zero absorption for any contractions. And after 5 hours of just contraction after contraction on top of each other, I was like, I can't do this. So I got an epidural because I was tired and I hadn't dilated really at all. And so I was like, I don't have any more energy because my water broke at 12:15 in the morning. And so I hadn't even gone to bed yet. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, I am going to literally die. So just give me the epidural. So that was him. And then with my second, same thing. But hers was the typical, my water broke first, but hers was the typical, it breaks and then it gushes a little and then it just keeps gushing. And that was the most uncomfortable thing ever. Cause you're just feel like you're peeing yourself and there's nothing you can do about it. Again, and you're sitting in a ton of water and you're like, this is disgusting, And so I'm I think this is how it's actually supposed to be. And I lasted longer without an epidural with her, but I lasted 6 or 7 hours with her. And then same thing. I was only at a 5 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this. I'm just done. But with Otto, I didn't have any time. With him, I ended up taking a cytotec pill because I felt like I had been contracting for 2 weeks already. Yeah. I would contract. And I know there's Braxton Hicks and things like that, but I was like, no, I'm legit contracting here. And then it would just stall and nothing would happen. And it was like that forever. And every time I would go in for a check, they'd be like, oh, he's got to be coming this week. We probably won't see you at your next appointment. We'll probably see you in a couple of days. You want to hear that stuff. And then you're sort of like, I wish they would have never said that to me. Cause then I was just anxious and irritated and mad. And right. That's what probably led me to getting a cytotec because I was like, he's supposed to be here. Why isn't he here? Right. So I got a cytotec and she told me what usually happens is it will help you dilate, but we're going to probably have to put you on Pitocin in the morning to make you contract. No, they gave me that cytotec pill at 10:30. And so I was totally planning on going to bed and waking up and having to do this thing. And then 3 hours later, he was out. So very different experience with Otto, but it was really funny. Before he was born, I was like, no, I'm not doing this ever again. I'm not doing this ever again. And then literally we're still in the delivery room. I was like, yeah, I could do that again. Yeah. And Taylor was like,
let me show you the video. Are you sure?
Yeah.
I think there's something about going through that pain and then coming out on the other side that's just I don't know, so empowering. Makes you feel so powerful and wow.
I totally just did that.
Exactly.
It was not pretty, but we made it.
Some women experience where they actually feel their body start pushing, like kind of, then they know when to push. Did you experience that with Otto?
Yeah, I totally did. Because I remember telling them they didn't know how far along I was dilated and they were going to try to check. And so I remember telling them, like, I'm going to push. And Taylor was like, she said she's going to push. And then before they even could look, I was just like, here he comes, So
Yeah.
yeah, because my body, again, same thing. Like my body was just doing it. There was nothing I was going to do to stop it. I think like that is probably the worst thing you could tell a mom is to not push. Like, how do you do that?
Did you have like solid birth plans going into your labors? Or are you just kind of a like wing it kind of personality with as far as birth?
I'm sort of a wing it personality. My first one, I did make some plans and like none of that went to plan. And like, you don't like, I just think it's funny when people make birth plans in their first babies because it gets pushed so hard, but like literally you have no idea what to expect and what your body's going to do. Like, not a previous experience at all. Like, you just don't know. And there was a few things that like I knew I wanted. Like I wanted delayed cord cutting and I wanted to like skip out on some of the I didn't want like erythromycin in their eyes. I didn't want a hep B shot. Like all that stuff. I knew those things, but as far as like everything else, I didn't know.
I saw in let's see, Otto's birth story, I think that you were like on the ball and even like doing some little dances and stuff. But did you do that with all of your births or were you like mostly in bed for any of them?
I was on the ball a lot, just like pre-labor with Theo, just trying to make sure that he stayed head down and yeah, just like bouncing all the time on that stupid ball. And I did that with Juno too. And with Otto, I had the birthing ball in the room and I was rolling around on it to try to help my body dilate a little bit. And I'd had a ball at home too, and I was doing that at home for like weeks, So, and it did nothing.
Right.
Yeah, and with Otto, because there was just no time. I was sitting upright and like standing and leaning over the bed for like at least half of that because it was only 3 hours, you know. And then probably like the last hour or so, I was sitting on the bed and like that was like contraction after contraction, like every 3 seconds. It was just awful. There was no breaks there. And I remember them asking me to lay down so that they could check me. And I remember telling them I couldn't lay down because I was in so much pain. I couldn't lay down. Yeah. With Juno, by the time I had my epidural, so in the very beginning, I was like in bed for a while. And then I remember getting up and walking around a little bit. But after my epidural, I was in bed. And actually with Theo, because because he was our first, and again, you don't know anything, you'd kind of just like are at the expense of what your doctors are recommending to you because you're like, okay, you've seen this a million times, like you know what's happening here, so I should just trust what you say. And that was the wrong decision for us and with him because we ended up having to suction him. They suctioned him because he was stuck. He would come down and crown and then he would go back in and he would crown, go back in. And it turned out that his umbilical cord was wrapped around his arm and he was just like basically bungeeing.
Oh gosh.
So in our heads, he wanted to suction to hold him down for a contraction enough to be able to like help him to just get out. And then after the fact, we were like telling that story to people and they're like, oh, you did not need to do that. You did not need to do that. Anyways, the whole thing was just like, oh, well, and then everyone was like, is your baby okay? And we're like, why should it not be? Because there's something wrong? Like, what should we, like, right. Yeah, like, did his head go back to normal shape? We're like, why? What's it supposed to, like, so then you're just like panicked over everything. And it's your first. I just remember being like so mad that I like screwed him up or something, and I wouldn't give him to anybody. I just like people would come over. Like my mother-in-law came over. She was there for like a week. So we were in LA at the time and she came out after he was like a week born. And I remember being mad that like she wanted him. I was like, no, He's mine. He's mine, you know? And I didn't know how to give him to anybody. Like so many things. Like I didn't get like those first minutes with him because they suctioned him. So they had to like have a whole team, a whole NICU team come and look at him right away and all the things. So like it was a good half hour after he came out before I even held him, you know?
Yeah.
So I felt like I just missed out on a lot with him. And so I think after that I was like so like nobody's taking him, you know? And I
Yeah.
would just sit on the couch for hours with him, you know, and stare. My
Yeah.
old coworkers always joke because I had told them that I thought I was gonna be bored. Like I'm kind of I used to be a workaholic. And I was like, I'm gonna be so bored in maternity leave. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna be gone for that long. I don't know. And then they were like, yeah, okay, Heidi, okay. And then he came out and I was like, I don't know what, like if I ever checked my email in the first 10 weeks. I just didn't care. I was like, I don't care who wants to know something from me, who needs what, like you all can figure it out. Peace, you know? Like
Yeah, you really have no idea how you're gonna react to like being a mom until it kind of happens. I think
yeah.
it's like, oh,
I was gonna ask, did that change anything about, like, did you change providers or did you change hospital or like just like your plan in general for your next birth after that happened?
I mean, we were in LA. We made $0 at that point. So we didn't have any money. So we basically just had to go off of whatever insurance was through my company. And so we didn't have very many options. So when we got pregnant with our second, it was unplanned. So we were like, oh shoot, you know, we got to figure this out. So I ended up having to quit my job to get another job. It was actually really good timing though, because there was lots of it was just a really good timing. They had better insurance at my next job, so I was able to switch doctors. But when I first got pregnant, I had to go see my other doctor, and like I was still nursing Theo at the time when he told me I had to stop, and I believed him, and you know all these things, and I didn't stop right away, but like I ended up weaning him off because I thought I had to. So like all these things that I'm like, I wish I just would have known or somebody would have told me that or I had somebody to walk alongside me, you know, instead of just like trusting what I'm supposed to be able to trust my doctor, you know? It's like all this stuff about like, oh, well you shouldn't be making medical decisions with your doctor. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that, you know? Some doctors have their own agendas for sure, you know?
yeah,
But that's just how I feel. Until
yeah,
you find that you trust, you know? So
right.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for, well, first of all, that's kind of what this channel is about, is just like I want people to have information because I feel like I learned so much after my first, and I was like, I know there were people that knew this, I just didn't realize that information was out there. Yeah. And then the other thing is just that your provider is huge, and some people get so worried about like changing providers or like, I've been through a lot with this person, but birth is such an intimate experience, and also people have a lot of like ways they want it to go. And so if you can't, you really have to make sure they align with what you want, because like you said, once you're in that birth room, they're kind of running the show, and so you really have to trust them, or else things happen that you're like, oh, I didn't want that.
yeah. Yeah, and you don't know in the minute because you're just in so much pain that you're just like, yeah, whatever, okay, cool, you know?
Okay, so you said they use suction. This is kind of a personal question, but like, what about tearing and things like that? Was that something you were worried about before birth, and then did that end up happening, or like, what do you want to share about that?
I mean, I think I was only worried about it because I heard other people worried about it. But ultimately, I was like, well, if that happens, it happens, and I'm just going to trust that process and I'll be fine, you know? And I think that's how I kind of go through life in general, is just like, it's going to happen, and I'll be fine, you know? And so when he was stuck, they did have to do an episiotomy.
Okay.
But it wasn't terrible. It was maybe like a second degree or something.
Okay.
Yeah, a second degree. When I had Juno, he said the same thing. That experience was completely different and way better. It was still in a hospital, and I still had the epidural and all things, but like that team was way better at explaining to me what was happening. And like my first doctor was basically like trying to motivate me to push harder, and he was really escalated, and so I was really escalated. And this doctor, it was like a total different experience, but he was like, all right, well, I need you to push this hard, use about 30% of what you did last time, you know?
Okay.
And then and he was like, okay, I'm gonna need you to cough. And then, I coughed and she was out. But in that process, he was like, I think because he was so careful, he was like, okay, I can see that you're either going to tear. I can see where they stitched you before. So he said that he was going to, he could cut or he could just let it do its thing. And I asked him what his opinion was. And he said, if he cut it, he could probably control it a little bit better. So he did. And he didn't have to cut as far as they had the time before. So I felt like that was good. But I think because he was so much calmer and was like really paying attention and helping me understand, then I could make a better decision about it and not be scared of it,
Right.
So, but with Otto, I mean, girl, there was no time for anything. And what was fascinating to me about his birth is that because my body, I could feel everything with him.
Yeah.
It's like I just instinctively knew what to do. It's not like I was like in my head being like, okay, I'm going to push now in this amount of percent or whatever. It was just like, oh, I need to move my hips this way and then I can get them out or whatever,
Yeah.
And with him, I did tear, but she said it wasn't bad at all. Cause that was the first question I asked. Actually, the second. The first question I asked was if I pooped. And the second question was, did I tear? And she was like, a little bit, but it's not bad. So it was okay.
Did they do stitches with that?
They did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your recovery like after the episiotomy? Did you feel like it was harder or?
No, I didn't really have a huge issue with the recovery piece, but I mean, I was like religious about care. I used like tucks every single time I went into the bathroom, and I had this like Honest Company bottom spray with witch hazel in it and dermaplast, and I just like I didn't touch it at all, like nothing. I just like tried to take really good care. I remember at one point being like, ooh, that itch is really bad. And then, but then it was probably like a day. And I think that's probably when the stitches were falling out.
Yeah.
And then it was over. But I don't feel like it was too horrible for me.
That's really good. And then like exercise and intercourse and those things, like you feel like it was normal getting back to that, or was any of that hard?
Well, I mean, so I do have pelvic floor issues. That is a thing. But I don't have like, it wasn't painful.
Okay.
It's just like, oh, I can't do squats because I'll pee, or I can't jump on a trampoline or do a jump rope because I'll pee, or, things like that, but not painful. Sex is, I don't think that really hasn't been disrupted either. I think, while your hormones are changing and going back to normal, you're like extremely dry.
Yeah.
And I remember my doctor, and that was the difference with my doctor and my third one with Otto too. Like they had those conversations with me before he was born and after he was born, to be like, okay, well, we're going to test your estrogen levels just to see where you're at, and if they're pretty low, we're going to give you a cream. And I was like, nobody ever told me that before, so I was like, thank you for caring about my sex life. I appreciate that. So my doctor also talked to Taylor in the room after he was born and was like very, very forward with him about what he could and could not do.
Okay.
Very forward. I mean, I appreciate that, like that your wife's doctor is telling you this is what you cannot do. Do not do these things at all, and do not bother her about those things. And she was like, I know you guys are in love. And she's like, I will, take very good care of her so that you can get back to your stuff. But right now it's a no-go, so yeah.
I love that they were willing to have that conversation. I feel like sometimes it's like taboo. Like that's one thing I'm always telling people, like lube, use lube, so much lube. Like there's nothing wrong with you. It's just you're breastfeeding. You just had a baby. Like you're dry. You're really dry. That's fine. Like don't suffer. It's okay.
Yeah. So after Theo, I had DR, and I still have DR. Like I'm probably at like a 2-finger gap right now. And I feel like after him, I got back down to like half a finger. Same with Juno. I got back down to like half a finger, but never beyond that. And with Otto, I think it's just the third time that, my stomach is stretched, and it was 15 pounds more with him than with the other two. So I just haven't come back. But like there's some exercises that I know I'm not supposed to do. And I had wanted to go get evaluated by a pelvic floor PT to just see where I'm at, but someone had told me that they wouldn't do that assessment on me until after 8 months postpartum, just to like give me time. And I hadn't heard of that before,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm 8 months now, so I'm like, well, I
Yeah.
haven't done it yet, but I could. I am going to the chiropractor regularly though right now, just to stay aligned.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we're
Yeah.
at.
Have you ever had like an internal pelvic floor exam before?
No, but I'm open and willing to have one, you
Yeah.
know? So, and again, I think that like women are so much more open now to like being able to take care of their bodies and not just accepting like a narrative for our postpartum bodies anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, you know? And I'm excited. I'm like so glad that there's so many women that like realize that this wasn't okay before. You know, we were just supposed to go along with it. Like, oh, we're just supposed to be okay that we're going to have like a pouch now. And not that I'm like, you can't have a pouch, but I'm sort of like, they're due to our muscles not being able to go back together, which causes pain for our back. And then eventually that becomes something. So like, it's having a pouch isn't the issue, it's why it's there.
Just the fact that like if you had an injury with anything else, it would be totally acceptable to get, you know, therapy or whatever kind of healing. Not that pregnancy is an injury, but it's a huge change for our body. It's like, why would you think that your body would just like go back to normal without help? I mean, I hear that all the time with incontinence too, is like, well, my doctor just said that like I'm a mom and I'm gonna pee my pants now. And it's like, well, you can if that's like what you want to do, but you don't have to. Like, we can definitely work on that. And I don't think people realize that. So if you do it again, if you had to, what would you do different?
I think if I did it again, I would try a birth center with a midwife. Now that I know what's on the other side of that, if I would have gotten an epidural with Otto, I don't think I would have said that, you know, because I don't know. I mean, that was excruciating, and I literally felt like I was going to die. But then like as soon as he was out, it was all over. And I felt being able to get him out, you know? And I'm like, dang, that I didn't know that was a thing, you know? So
Yeah, I think there's not like one right way or wrong way to birth, but it's really cool that you got to have two different experiences. Anything else that you're like, I think I would do that different?
I mean, I would be in water. I would probably do a water birth. I'd probably do a lot more body mind prep beforehand, just to like be able to calm myself down and like learn how to breathe through. And I think with Otto, I did that. I was trying to breathe a lot during the contractions so that I wouldn't tense up, but it still was excruciating. So,
Did you do any like birth class? I know some people do like hypnobirthing or birth classes. Or did you do any of that with any of your kids?
no, with my first two, like first of all, I just didn't have time. Again, I was a workaholic. And I didn't have time to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I would like read stuff. I read a bunch of stuff and watched like YouTube videos and whatever. And I've watched, okay, and before Juno, I watched a ton of water births because I'd considered that at the hospital if they would let me do that. And I like after watching those and then after having Otto, I'm like, how were you guys not screaming? Like I have never screamed louder in my life. And like you guys are just like silent. Like how are you so quiet?
I am not much of a screamer, but I'm definitely like loud. I'm more into the moaning, I guess. But I think the same thing. Or like when people talk about orgasmic birth, I'm like, is that really possible?
I don't know. I don't know how you could have such an orgasm and that much pain, but yeah.
I think I have to ask, what is Taylor like in the birth room? I saw that he brought an air fryer to your last birth, which is funny.
Yeah, he did. And he like joked that he was going to bring it before. And so when we got to the hospital and we were like checking in, the nurses asked him where his air fryer was. And he was like, oh, it was a total joke, but I will bring it. And then he did, you know, but he's pretty good in the delivery room. Taylor's always been really good at keeping an even keel of keeping things funny and light, but just like not getting overly stressed out. But yeah, he's a great partner. I'm in this last one, I think I was in so much pain that Like I couldn't hear my doctor's directions to me. So he would hear what she said, and then he would basically like yell it in my ear. Whatever she said, he would just say it louder. I think he was pretty sweet in all three of those births. And I mean, I know sometimes men just feel like they're helpless, like they can't really do that much except for like whatever you ask them to. But I don't know, when you're in that much pain, you don't know what to ask.
I feel like they can definitely help set the tone though, whether they're stressed or anxious or just like you said, just like helping you hear, it's a voice you're used to listening for. So like helping you, listen for it. But yeah, I think they can be really helpful.
Yeah, but also if they're really stressed out, then that stresses me out. You kind of need like a steady person in the room to be like, okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, okay. So
If you were going to give a new mom or a first time mom some piece of advice, you've now gone through 3 and had kind of different experiences with each, what would be like the couple of things you might say to them?
I would say to like follow accounts of like birthing companies to give you like what to expect and things to think about before you go in. But like, don't stress yourself about having this crazy, crazy plan, and trust yourself a little bit more, especially a first time mom. Like, you walk into the room and you have zero clue what to expect from your own body or from the people around you or how the process even works. So, you really have to like find people that you're going to be able to trust in the room to help you make the decision when you really can't make it yourself. I don't know, like you can compare your stories all the time, and like I compared like Theo and Otto's birth or Theo and Juno's birth all the time, and I think I spoke really negatively about Theo's birth a lot. I don't think that's good either. Like there was experiences that I wish would have been different, but I still birthed him, and like his entrance into the world was no greater like or worse than anybody else's experience of coming into the world. And I think I need to protect that over him. There's I think there definitely is something to the way that you speak about someone's life, so you need to be careful about how you talk about that, and how you like what type of narrative you put over your own kids' life. Like if all I did was ever talk about how difficult Theo was, like what kind of life am I speaking over him? I do think that like birth is like to take it seriously, but like allow it to be what it is. Like this is someone's entrance to the world. It says a lot about like it can set a tone for like how you prepare for that, can set a tone for how you prepare for this new relationship. Like after I had Otto, I heard someone else talking kind of something along the same lines, but she was saying that she didn't want to rush her baby. And so she went to like 42 and a half weeks.
Wow.
And she was like, I didn't want to rush them. I wanted them to have the space to do their own thing and to like trust my baby. And I was like, oh yeah, I wish I would have done that. So that's probably something that I would do different next time too, is just like not rush that process and just like have the relationship with my child from the very beginning that allows them to make their own decision.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's kind of 2 stories going on. There's your story and how you feel about the whole birth and what happened to you in the labor and delivery room. And then also like your baby's story as this, like you said, it's their entrance into the world. And I think sometimes it is hard to find like coming to a peace with what happened, but also, like you said, celebrating what happened for your baby. Did you experience any postpartum like depression or anxiety with any of your kids?
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I don't think that I experienced so much depression as much as like anxiety, just like having this fear that something was going to happen, and like making my decisions or living in that fear. I don't know. So I'm pretty faith-based, but I kind of came to the conclusion that like for me, like I feel like my kids are on borrowed time to me. Whatever situation I could be faced with them is like I can trust that for me God will meet me in those places, or that like the right people will be around me to deal with those things, and to not like live in this whole like fear. Because what if I came to like the end of my life and all of the things that I worried about never happened, and I just wasted all that time worrying about these things that never happened, you know? So, a couple of things I had to do though, because you know how Instagram and Facebook algorithms work. Like, you read a story about, you know, something happening to a baby or a kid your age, and then like all your feed is stories about things that happen. And Taylor was like, "Why do you read that? Like, why are you reading that?" And I'm like, "Because I feel like I have to witness it with them, you know? Like, I feel like somebody just has, you know, if something happened to my kid, I would want people to like witness it with me, you know?" And he was like, "Okay, but for you, you cannot do that." Yeah. So I just, for a while, I just kind of had to shut at least Facebook off, because Facebook, it was more Facebook that was bringing all of these like articles and stories and things. So I had to like turn it off and like specifically try to go look for other things, and not to like negate those stories or like that that's a real hurt in the world, but to be like, I am now controlled by these narratives. And so I had to make a change for like, and kind of clean my Instagram up a little bit of like some accounts that I was following. It's not that, again, same thing. I don't want to negate hurt in the world, but I also like, there's a balance and a moderation of that. And for me, I was just way overboard on the other side, and didn't even realize that I had any postpartum anxiety until one day, like I was at work and my boss told me. She was like, I think you're struggling with postpartum anxiety. And I was like, what is that? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I totally am. Again, when you're educated that these things happen and that your hormones can go extremely crazy and cause you to think all these things, then you can have a plan to like a plan in action to know what to do when those feelings start coming up, you know? And so for me, I had to tell myself, okay, I'm going to validate that I feel this way, but also it doesn't make it true, you know? And just because I feel it in this minute doesn't make it true. I would tell Taylor when I was feeling these ways, there's like right after, probably, Otto was like probably a week old, and I was trying to send an email. And like we were trying to send our like mass email out to our like MailChimp stuff, postpartum brain and all the things. Like I could not for the life of me remember how to send a mass email out. No, I just like the dumbest thing. And I was in tears about it. Taylor was like out he was like out on an errand. And I called him bawling. And I was like, I can't figure out how to send an email. It's not working. And he was like, okay, I'll come home and we'll take a look at it. Okay. And I was like, okay. Like, just like, but he didn't make me feel bad about it. He didn't laugh.
Yeah.
He just was like, okay, okay, I'll come home and we'll take a look, you know. And I think like a week later he was just like, yeah, you were something else, you know. But like, again, I had a plan to be like, okay, I'm gonna say what I feel, and I'm gonna recognize and just release it as like, this is valid that I feel this in this minute, and it doesn't make it true. So so I just found a really good balance for them, and it still happens right now. And I know like if I am feeling like extremely overwhelmed, like that's not normal for me. So I'm like, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing, and I need to either go see a friend, or I need to get in the bathtub, or I need, you know, check out for a while. And so
Right.
I just have a plan for it. So I probably do struggle with it. I just am managing it. And you kind of have to let it pass too, you know, like last week we were in quarantine and it was like the worst week ever, you know? And so um by the end of the week, I was like, I don't even know why I'm a mom. Like, why am I a mom? Why do I have kids? Like, all I'm doing is yelling, and we hate each other right now, and we're screaming at each other, and nothing's getting done. Like, I feel like the worst failure in the world. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit in this. I'm just gonna let it pass. Just like let it go. I'll be fine. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I will figure this out, you know? And that's what I did. I sat in the bathtub for like an hour, just like kept trickling more hot water in. And then I went like Theo and I had like a huge fight, and I was like, before I go to bed tonight, I'm gonna work this out with him, and we did. and it was fine. And Taylor the next morning was like, you need to get out and do something again. Everybody's quarantined. So Theo and I had another fight. And I was like, okay, I'm not leaving like this. I'm fixing this, and I will go out, but I want to fix this first, you know? And so, so yeah, it was just like a lot of that, but like so many narratives of like, gosh, I'm a horrible, horrible mother that can't get it together with my kids, you know? And I'm triggering him, he's triggering me, you know, like, why am I such a trigger, you know?
Like you said, I don't think a lot of people realize, and especially when you're in the moment, it is hard to recognize. So it's awesome when people talk about it, so you can be like, oh, I recognize that, or partners can be like, oh yeah, I recognize that. And then you can get the help that you need, because like you said, it's your hormones. I mean, your hormones are all over the place. It's not, something's wrong with you. That's just like, it's just part of the process sometimes. So, well, I love your channel. I'm not kidding when I say that. We've watched a lot of your videos. So thanks so much, Heidi, for being on my channel today. Truly, it was an honor to like have you here and be able to interview you. I am going to throw one of my favorite videos from Dudedad up here and this screen, and so you guys should definitely check that out next. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I will see you all in the next video.